You're watching Artist on Record, your ultimate intimate conversation with your favorite artist. In the hot seat, we have Mr. Alan Niven, former Guns N' Roses Great White manager. He has a new book, Sound and Fury. You can pre-order it now. Links are in the description down below or click right here above your screen. Welcome Alan to the show. It all starts now. Don't touch that dial. Bam.
Well, he overdoses. I'm at home watching TV and Adler gets on the phone. He goes, "Nicky's dead. Where are you?" I swear to God, I was pulling up on Franklin before the phone hit the floor. I mean, I went up to Hollywood like a fucking rocket. The ambulance had already come and taken Nicky. I went straight to see the Sinai. And I got there in time to see Nicky being helped away by two girls into a car. And fortunately, he was not dead.
Your new book, Sound and Fury, Rock and Roll Stories from Alan Niven. You might know the name. He managed Guns N' Roses, Great White, just to mention a few. I'm going to ask you the burning question. When you were going to write this book, were you worried that maybe you might offend some Guns N' Roses members in this book?
Absolutely not. Was Slash worried when he wrote something untrue and dishonest in his book about me? He didn't give a shit. Why should I?
It all starts now. Don't touch that dial. Bam! Sound and Fury, Rock and Roll Stories with Alan Niven. You can order the book now. Click in the descriptions down below or right here above the screen. Here's Alan Niven, Artist on Record. The burning question. You're putting it all in writing out there for the world to see.
Let's start with this. I don't like rock and roll books. They're all the same. They all have the same story arc. We start with the deprived childhood, then we go into the indivisible young guns, then power grabs, greed, girlfriends, wives, mothers come along. You have the dissipation, and then in the back of the book you have recriminations and blame, and it's all a big yawn. All rock and roll books are the same. And I did not want to write another rock and roll book like that. I'm just an old, dusty jukebox sitting in the corner of the kitchen. If somebody notices me and pours me a glass of port, I'll tell them a story. And if they give me another glass of port, I might tell them another story. So in terms of the book, that was the obvious thing to do. Don't do the chronological history that everybody's done. Just tell the stories that are amusing, that people want to hear, that you would tell at the kitchen table. So it's not a GnR book. It's not really an Alan Niven book. It's just a collection of stories. And as you notice, it opens with a quote from Macbeth, which I think describes things quite well, and basically suggests that I am just an idiot telling tales. And there's also my little observation that rock and roll is God's occupation for the unemployable. Because at the end of the day, it's just about rock and roll and musicians and how nuts we all are.
Bunch of misfits we all are. It's really a job for misfits.
Exactly. So, I mean, am I talking about blowing people up in Afghanistan? Am I talking about horrors committed in Iraq? No, we're just talking about a bunch of goofy fucking rock and rollers. And it's kind of funny. And you should find humor in it. That's not to say that I chose the title from Macbeth, Sound and Fury, because there's an intimation there that this book also includes witches and crazy wives and betrayals and treachery. That's all in there too.
I asked you before about offending other members that band members you worked with, especially the Guns N' Roses camp, because now it's a different world. Guns N' Roses is not the same Guns N' Roses from back in the day.
30 years ago.
It's 30 years ago. We're all grown up now.
Well,
some are.
Some claim to be.
When you were preparing to write this book, did you get any notice or letters from anybody? Because everybody's now not as punk rock as they used to be. Everybody's business. So did anybody write to you or inquire about this, like an Axl camp, a Duff camp, a Slash camp?
Slash has been encouraging me to get this book done for a long time. I have all the emails. Where's the book? How's the book coming? I sent him my original manuscript, which I hated myself because I found it pedestrian, depressing. It wasn't fun. It was a chore to do it. And I was looking for a way out. So I thought, let's send it to someone and have them tell me not to do it. And then I've got someone to blame and I've got an excuse for getting out of this. Mm-hmm. Because the other thing is that, do you know how many times people ask, hey, Niv, when are you going to write your memories? It's been constant for fucking decades. When are you going to write the book? And I had no particular desire or love to do the book. Slash was encouraging. I sent him my original manuscript, but, the fucker came back and said, book's great, finish it, which is exactly what I didn't want to hear. So I put that version on the shelf and I had no one to blame. And as for getting it formed in a different format that was more entertaining, mm-hmm. I blame Scott Rowley for that to a large degree. He oversees various magazines, including Classic Rock in the United Kingdom. And he has been bugging me forever to do this. He would even send me biographies and autobiographies of other people to say, let this inspire you, read this, so on and so forth. And he nailed me one day, and forgive me for saying this, but he turned around and he said, I wish I could write like you. And that kind of made me feel obliged to get it done. For somebody to say that is rather extraordinary. And he deals with writers every day. So at that point, I gave it some thought and came up with the concept of just tell stories. It's not a Guns N' Roses book. It's not a Great White book. It's not an Ib book. It's not an Elton John book. It's stories. The fascination is self-evident, is here you and I are 30 years on talking about ancient history. And that's not because we're indulging ourselves by pressing this on other people. It's because people are interested, which absolutely blows me away that 30 years on, people still want to know what happened. They want to know what the stories are. And they're still listening to the music on the radio and they're still playing the music. And I, for one, never expected that 30 years ago. But for me, I think it's graceless that when people have a fascination with that kind of longevity to it, that if you don't tell the stories, then, what kind of a sourpuss are you? Just tell the stories. What the hell? It's only rock and roll.
Axl Rose, Aaron Everly. That's a whole love story right there.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I mean, they can talk about their own relationship. It's not for me to impinge on that, except where it impacted the band. And in specific, as you'll know, I'm referring to the video for It's So Easy and the original edit for that. And that was not a smart idea and not a good idea. And what Axl did to Aaron in that video was no way to treat a sweet child. And of course, I went to Geffen and said, guess what? We're not going to put out the It's So Easy video. And I think I kind of cynically said, we're overexposed. And Aaron definitely was in that video. So, you know, that's worth talking about. That's valid.
Steven Adler, his drumming, was it Axl always angry with Steven because anything that happened, drama with Aaron, or was it his playing that got him out of the band? What's the real story on that?
I think you've got a perfect storm there. I think I was naive to think that Axl had forgiven Steven. But on the other hand, you know, I sat with Slash and I said, listen, Steven's your buddy, your childhood buddy. Can he record these songs or not? And Slash said, I don't think so. And I said, well, then we have to find another drummer who can. You know, if Steven can't play Estranged, if he can't play Coma, if he can't play Locomotive, then we have to find somebody who can play those songs. So is it Axl saying he goes, or is it Slash saying he goes, or are they both saying he goes? And, you know, the old saw is, oh, he got thrown out of GnR for taking drugs. What a joke. No, he was dismissed from GnR because he couldn't play the material that the band, and especially Axl, wanted to record. So there's your problem. I mean, you know, we fought countless battles with various people's addictions. But at the bottom line is you have to fight the battles with them, but only they can win the war. And quite obviously, Stevie was losing his war.
Well, how come Steven left the band at this critical juncture?
Steven didn't leave the band.
Or how come you and
Steven was fired? We gave him every ultimatum. We tried working with other drummers. We had Steven sign a contract saying if he went back to drugs, then he was out. He couldn't leave his drugs. Other things have happened involved with Steven that Steven is basically someone I used to know. It makes me feel bad, but there's other things beside the band that he was involved in with his drugs that have been very dangerous and scary, and I want nothing to do with him.
Is that what you were talking about when you were open for the Rolling Stones in LA last year? And said somebody in this band has been dancing with Mr. Brownstone, essentially?
No, there was majority of the band was at that time, or too much alcohol, or too much something. Me, I was eating too much or whatever, and just sitting on my ass too much.
Yeah. How's it going with the new drummer? Is he fitting right in, or it must be very hard at this point to bring somebody new into the band?
It was a miracle. Right. He saved the band's life. He came in. He's in a.
Now, who was there? Somebody that you wanted for Guns N' Roses as a drummer that you were like, this is the guy for you guys?
Nope.
No.
Slash took it upon himself to start shortlisting people. And as I recall, he was the one who thought of Sorum. And as I remember, Sorum was in
the Cult.
The Cult, yeah, when we toured with them. They've got to play with whoever they choose. So you tend to stand back and go find who you're comfortable with. Go find who you can play with. You know, and unfortunately, with Matt, they picked somebody who's a strong drummer, but he's two-dimensional. He can't swing. He's a hard hitter, but the swing's not there.
And on the drums, here to turn your brains into mashed rice is Mr. Matt Sorum.
No, that's one thing that Stevie had. That swing,
yes.
That appetite
yes.
swing, I call it.
Yes. And, you know, that was lost. But ain't that the way? You know, the original lineups of bands that catch your heart and work. and go to success, and then they change a member or somebody expires and dies, it's never the same band again. Doesn't matter who it is.
No,
You know,
no, it's never. Well,
with the Rolling Stones, they got lucky with Mick Taylor. I tend to look at them and say their peak of being a performing band is 1973. That's when they were just extraordinary. And creatively, it's Beggars, Bleed, and Sticky. And of course, all the cognoscenti, the brilliant and wise critics say it's Exiles on Main Street. And I go, it might have been if they'd recorded that album at Muscle Shoals and got some of the Muscle Shoals soul into it. But to me, Exiles doesn't nearly have the soul of the previous records.
What the relationship between Izzy and Axl? Here you got two guys that were childhood friends, and they just grow together as musicians. But now you have Izzy going to you know, and he can't talk to his childhood friend anymore.
Well, in this Goldstein interview that I was watching, Goldstein made the comment that that Izzy went to LA to get away from Axl, which made me smile. And I went, no, that's not true. Izzy went to LA because he wanted to get into a really good band. He wasn't going to get into a really good band in fucking Lafayette, Indiana. Do you know how many Lafayette, Indianas there are in America? Small, tiny, half a donkey towns where nothing happens and there's no life nowhere. Izzy wanted to get to where there was life and where there were other musicians. And that's why he went to LA. And obviously that was why Axl went to LA too. And it took him a couple of goes to get there. But they did have a really good friendship. And obviously were very significant creatively together. But with the situation with the Tumbling Dice, the chapter Tumbling Dice, I was caught in a dilemma because I had Axl on the one hand saying, I don't want to do the Aerosmith tour. And 4 other band members going, when are we going to get out on the road with Aerosmith, Niv? And of course, at the end of the day, I had signed a contract with 5 people, collectively known as Guns N' Roses. So I did not serve the whim of one individual, but my responsibility was to the whole. So here I am, I'm sitting there, and I've got Axl on the phone saying, cancel the tour. And I've got 4 other band members saying, let's go. So what do you do in that dilemma? I can understand to some degree where Axl's coming from, because he obviously had a stage fright. I mean, it took a special circumstance to get him on stage in front of the Rolling Stones. But getting out of the bedroom and going and performing with people you've admired all your life, I can see where that's tough for Axl, because he may be a little bit shy about it all. And I had Dice sitting on my coffee table. And I'd once read a book called The Dice Man. Mm-hmm. And the thesis of The Dice Man is that we get neurotic when we have diametric opposed desires or choices, and we have to choose between one or the other. So the thesis in the book is this guy gives up all his choice to the dice, that he doesn't have to think anything through, that he doesn't have to weigh this or weigh that. He just lets the dice decide. So I'm looking at the coffee table, and I'm thinking, do I cancel the Aerosmith tour, on a Wednesday night when the first gig is on the Sunday? Or do we all go, and if Axl doesn't turn up, then he can explain it to the rest of the world? And I'm looking at the dice and I'm going, guess what? And I decided on the throw of the dice. And I actually gave the odds to Axl, because what I said was, I throw a 12 or an 11, we go, whether Axl comes or not. And if he comes, great. And if he doesn't, it's on him to explain why. And if I throw a 10 or less, I'm canceling. I gave the benefit of the odds to Axl. I threw an 11.
Was that the reason he didn't want to do Aerosmith? He was a little intimidated by Tyler about the band?
I'm having to make my own assumptions about that. I never sat him down and said, what's the fucking problem?
You never did, huh?
No. If I sat down with Axl and said, what's the fucking problem? Every time there was a problem, I'd have been talking to Axl constantly, because there were always problems in his mind. But it seems fairly self-evident, you know, and I had a certain empathy for that, because I don't like going on stages. I've only ever played once live on a stage, and I will never do it again. That's not to say it went badly. It actually went really, really well, but it is not my thing. I don't like that kind of circumstance. And I can well empathize with trying to be a front man and going and investing yourself with conviction in those songs night after night. How do you do that? How can you be emotionally believable on demand at 9 o'clock at night for 3 or 4 times a week in front of 15, 20, 30,000 people? That's a tough thing.
Mm-hmm.
Bass players, drummers, guitar players have something between them and the audience. They have their instrument. They can get into their feel. They can get into their lock. They can get into their groove. But if you're a singer, you're naked out there. And are you going to be convincing? And it is a kind of bizarre thing to do, to go out there and try and invest yourself with genuine emotion in a song night after night after night. I mean, how many times are you going to sing "They're Out to Get Me" and mean it? Of course, everybody says, I rely on the energy I get from the audience.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's what gets me through it. But in terms of myself, would I want to go out there and try and be a front man and sing night after night? No fucking thank you.
It's funny when he didn't want to do originally the Aerosmith tour, because they really knocked it out apart, Guns N' Roses.
That's the moment in the band's history. That is the moment of pure fucking amazing magic, when they were on fire and the energy was amazing every night. That tour, opening for Aerosmith, is the apex of the Guns N' Roses story.
Oh.
It really is. It's hands down
Absolutely.
the most.
Our new weather guy. Welcome back to the Weekend Rock. A little bit of hard rock heaven fell to earth this past Tuesday when Deep Purple, Aerosmith, and Guns N' Roses shared a 5-hour bill at New Jersey's Meadowlands Arena. Talk about fireworks. Let's take a look.
Rock and roll legends, and you've got one up-and-coming rock and roll legend band in Guns N' Roses. That's it, baby. Rock on.
Okay, that about does it for this edition of the Weekend Rock. We'll be back next week.
And the reason why I say I saw them play New York, Jersey. I was there when they opened up, and we talked about this before in the show, and it just kicked ass. It was just incredible. That's why it's so funny to hear the backstories of this, and to see one member, Axl, not wanting to do it, the other guys want. Here's how I'll shop, because in the beginning, Guns N' Roses weren't getting the fair push from Geffen Records. Correct? Am I wrong on that? They weren't getting a push in the beginning.
There was a night I was in Dallas with the local Geffen rep, and we might have had a drink or two, And he might have stepped out of his Geffen responsibilities and opened up a little bit for me. But he said something to me that night that was fucking golden. He said, listen, here's your job. You have to keep your band going while we work through Whitesnake, and then we work through Aerosmith, and then we can get to your band. Now, most people would have been really upset about that and gone running back to Geffen and going, how come you're not giving all the effort you should to my band because you're giving it to... But it was, what he said was absolutely obvious common sense. They're maximizing the sales they can get out of Whitesnake. They're getting the 5 million records. They're going after Aerosmith. They're going to get another 5 million records. If you can keep your band alive till that's past or getting past, then we can focus the company entirely on your band, which is basically what happened. You know, Eddie Rosenblatt told me to bring the band home in December of '87. You sold 250,000 records. That puts Geffen in the black because they're getting $10 a unit. So they're in the black on the project. And I'm sitting there going, what the fuck are you talking about? We're at 250,000 records in 6 months with no airplay, with no MTV. What do you think might happen if we got a little bit of both? We might even get as far as gold. You know,
Wow.
I'm keeping my band out there. And oh, by the way, Eddie, I want to do another video. I need an advance to get another video done. And he'd given me 75 to do Jungle. And to do Jungle, I had to piggyback that on a Great White video and use the same director, the same equipment, and amortize the costs over 4 days. And that was how we managed to get the Jungle storyboard done. Rosenblatt gave me half that amount for Sweet Child. That was his fuck you to me. Oh, you want to keep your band out there? Well, I'll give you 30. You can take 35 grand. Let's see if you can get a video for 35 grand. And of course, I'm sitting with Nigel Dick, the director, and we know there's only one thing we can do, and that is, with the amount of film that we can afford, film the band and only the band. And I am really happy about that because there's no cockamamie concept getting in the way of people's perception of the song. And I've always believed that the best videos are the ones that are either documentary or just about the band.
Now, the first video for Guns N' Roses, what was the first one you did?
Jungle.
Jungle was the first one. Okay.
Yep.
That
Jungle,
was out the
Jungle
gate.
was first. Yeah.
Okay.
That was the first one. Sweet Child was second. Paradise was third, and Patience was my fourth one.
You gotta take the time because the lights are shining bright.
Now it's funny because Don't Cry, that was written before one of the early songs, but didn't make Appetite. What's the reason for that? Didn't go on that. They saved it for later.
There were two reasons. One, we had the album with Appetite. We had enough songs on it. It had a playthrough. The tracking order was good. And the other thought was, we want to avoid the sophomore slump.
Mm-hmm.
So let's be smart and hold 2 or 3 songs over so that when we get off the bus in a year's time and Geffen's in our face saying, get in the studio, you've got to get another record out there before everybody forgets you. We want to keep momentum going. Nothing was to hold over some songs from the writing period of Appetite and have those in the larder on the shelf, so we had something to start building a second album on. So we had November Rain, Don't Cry, and You Could Be Mine, which ended up being the 3 singles from Illusion. So that was the premeditation. Be smart. Have something that you've got in the cupboard that you know you're not starting from scratch when you've got to go to the next record.
Yeah, very smart. Good plan you had there for that one.
Yeah.
You know, hard to do, because Don't Cry, it's like you're holding this gem here. It's like, oh, what do we do with it? Because it's a great song, you know, too. It's like, what do we do? We got these 2 songs.
Because we had great songs on Appetite.
It was every song. It's like Back in Black. It's just one of those records.
Yeah. We had a well-constructed record. Did I think that radio would ever play it? No, I was well aware that we were going to have a tough time there. My perception was always, if we can keep some professionalism going here, we may be able to have a truly worthwhile underground band. And who knows, we might even get to gold status one day. You know, the people who say, oh, I knew this was going to be the best-selling debut rock and roll record of all time. They're either certifiable or totally lying. None of us knew it was going to be as big as it was. I mean, it just blew up in our faces at a certain point. And we got this incredible blue-collar response.
But Sweet Child of Mine is such a beautiful written song. You had even while recording that record, you had to go, that's going to be the one that's going to take this band to the top. Such a hit. You know.
Yes and no. How's it going to happen if MTV keep ignoring you like they have for the first 6 months of the record? How's it going to reach an audience if radio aren't playing the band? I mean, there was no looking at any track on Appetite and saying that's the one that's going to put it over the top, because we were being denied access to the main forms of reaching an audience, radio and MTV. We had none of that in the first 6 months. What we had was the band out on the road and press, especially British press. God bless the British press.
So keeping the band at that time, the early days, on the road, was it safer for them to be on the road than to be home?
Oh, fuck yeah. If you've got the band in the bus, you've got half an ability to be able to monitor who they're scoring off. If they're all at home and on their own, you've no idea who's chasing which dragon around the town. You know, keep your band together, keep it mobile, and you've got half a chance of keeping them alive.
Motley Crue, Nikki Sixx, Steven Adler, Slash, that whole story.
Yeah. Well, that's what they used to do.
Steven had a broken arm at that time, right?
Yeah.
Didn't he have a broken arm? Okay.
Yeah, they'd get fucked up together.
They were bored in Hollywood, and what happens, Alan?
Well, he overdoses. I'm at home watching TV, and Adler gets on the phone. He goes, "Nikki's dead. Where are you?" I swear to God, I was pulling up on Franklin before the phone hit the floor. I mean, I went up to Hollywood like a fucking rocket. The ambulance had already come and taken Nikki. I went straight to see the Sinai. And I got there in time to see Nikki being helped away by 2 girls into a car. And fortunately, he was not dead. You know, but if you dance with Mr. Brownstone, if you're not careful, occasionally you're going to stumble and you may fall off the dance floor. It's not a thing to do.
You were hanging out with Slash and his girlfriend. You overdose. Slash's girlfriend brings you to the emergency room. You didn't know this. You wake up and you say there could be life after death because you saw the whole thing. You said they said you were technically dead?
Mm-hmm.
And you said you saw yourself laying in bed, you saw the hospital room, and you were above the room. So do you believe in life after death?
Pretty close. I mean, it's when I overdosed at the hotel. They put me on the gurney. I had later I was like, God, it feels like I could see the whole thing. And I blurted it out. I blurted it out on Behind the Music. And I was like, why did I say that? I'm going to have to talk about this forever. Then when I found the diaries, I actually saw the entries where I was saying, I don't know what it was, but something happened. And that was really when I said, I got to clean up. And this is like out of control, whether I hallucinated it or whether I saw it, but it was written down on a piece of paper. So that kind of freaked me out. Do I believe in life after death? I'm not sure.
So you got Slash, you got Steven hanging out with Nikki. So did Steven save his life, basically? Nikki Sixx's life?
I'm not a nurse. I'm not a doctor. I can't verify whether any particular person's actions were life-saving, although it was my understanding that they shot adrenaline. Once the ambulance got there, they shot adrenaline straight into to Nikki, and that probably got his heart going, kick-started his heart, so to speak. But there it goes.
There it goes. Crazy story, man.
Yeah. And that's it's just rock and roll stories, darling.
A lot of stories like that. The Todd Cruz story you cover that in the book.
There are certain things you can't avoid.
Todd Cruz, for people listening, he was the bass player for Jet Boy, but also he was working. He was friends with Slash and those guys, and he was teching. I
mean, the one thing that I didn't go into detail in the book is probably the thing that I should have. And that is the demise of the band that I knew. And the role played by Michelle Anthony and Doug Goldstein. 30 years on, I think it's fair for me to look back and say, when I started, no one wanted to work with them. They could not get management. Eddie Rosenblatt would not allow Shoutout to start recording Appetite until they had management. When I left, the last action that I took on their behalf was to put Wembley Stadium on sale, which sold out really fast. So I think it's reasonable for me to say, I did my fucking job. And I did it pretty well. I got them from nowhere to there. Thereafter, once Dougie takes over, aided and abetted by the band manager, the band lawyer, Michelle Anthony, what do you get? You get a record of punk covers. I mean, that's not a very punk thing to do in itself, an album of punk covers. And you get Axl's solo record. And is it fair to call it Axl's solo record? Yes, because he was the only one that Geffen were trying to bribe with $1 million to finish the record so they could put it out. And he's the only GnR guy on this record. To my knowledge, Slash is not there, Izzy's not there, Duff's not there, so it's a solo record. And when you're in total control of the recording and the creativity, that by definition is a solo effort. And I will say that I think Axl did himself an incredible disservice by putting it out there as a Guns N' Roses record. I think he would have been far better received had he put it out just in his own name. I think people would have been far more accepting of that and would have respected that more and probably enjoyed it more. But, you make some decisions that are probably based in fear, will people go out and buy my solo record? And it's easier for me to sell a record that's got Guns N' Roses on it. And you make a bad decision, probably encouraged by bad management. He should have had.
Not to interrupt you. Sorry to interrupt you. Wait, what were you going to say? He should have what?
He should have been advised strongly to put it out under your own name. It's going to work better for you. Because, I don't live in a vacuum. And there were countless people who are fans of the band who went, what is this? We're waiting forever for this record. And he's putting it out as a Guns record, and it's really a solo record. He was working against the tide before he managed to release it. So he should have put it out under his own name. That would have been far better for him. But, if you have a bad manager, you're going to get bad advice. So that's it. That's what you get from 1991 to the present day.
You're saying as an original Appetite, Use Your Illusion fan, I'm pining for music that's more closely aligned with what they had done in their kind of earlier stuff.
Okay. Whereas for my period of time, we go from nowhere to somewhere, and we get the catalog that they work off today created. So well done, Doug Goldstein. Well done, Michel Anthony. Now, Michel Anthony, God bless her, I think some of the reason why I'm beginning to hear rumblings in LA is she wants to shut me up, because I don't think people at UMG, where she's number 2 in charge of American recordings, I don't think a bunch of people are very impressed by the fact that she and Goldstein basically destroyed one of the best rock and roll bands that the world has ever seen. The first thing they fucked up on big time is in losing Izzy. How stupid is that? I mean, in terms of the spirit and style of Guns N' Roses, Izzy, to me, was the majority factor, not the only factor. They all contributed. But any great band is like a molecule, and a molecule has differing entities within its construction of different significance and power. But in the original GnR molecule, Izzy was a major part. Not the only part, not the major part, but a major part. And to lose him was a dumb move. Now, Peter Paterno used to be the counsel for GnR, and he left his law firm to go to Disney to start Hollywood Records. So Peter was hoping that I would stay with his law firm, and he recommended Michelle to me. And I met with Michelle, and I thought, yeah, she's smart, she's good. Most significantly, she has Peter's endorsement. So with Peter's endorsement, I was encouraged to say, yeah, you can replace Peter. From a personal point of view, I thought it would be healthy to have some degree of female consciousness within the environment. We could have been accused of having a certain misogyny within the band.
I used to love her, but I had to kill her. I can still hear her complain.
All that. So to have a significant executive involved who was female, I thought was healthy. Where did I fuck up? You want to know where I fucked up? I didn't do my homework properly. Because if I'd done my homework properly, I knew that Dee Anthony was her dad.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a vague idea, Dee managed Frampton, Dee managed Humble Pie, Dee managed
Major acts.
Yeah. Oh, Stevie Marriott, he's up there in my top 5 singers of all time.
Absolutely.
And he was a good guitar player. Stevie Marriott was fucking amazing. I loved him. Anyway.
Yeah, he was Stevie Marriott's where Paul Stanley got the preaching, you know on his live raps. That's all comes from Marriott for anybody listening.
But anyway, had I done my homework properly, I might have found out about the meeting that Stevie Marriott had in Little Italy with Dee Anthony, because Stevie Marriott and his wife went to see him and confront him about the fact that he wasn't being paid his due royalties, and he was convinced that Dee was siphoning off Stevie's royalties to underwrite Peter Frampton's developing career. So he goes to this meeting in Little Italy, and as the story goes, Dee was sat there with some interesting kind of people, cauliflower ears and bent noses sort of thing. And one of them turned around to him apparently and said something along the lines of, "You don't come off to Dee for money. Forget about it. Just forget about it. Get the fuck out of here. You're not seeing any more fucking money. Fuck off." Now, who do you think said that to Stevie Marriott? John Gotti. That was Dee Anthony's associations with the Gambino family and Gotti.
Whoa.
So obviously Stevie and his wife left and took the threat seriously. And if I'd been smart, I would have gone, I'm not sure that Michelle is the healthiest person to have in the environment, given her father's associations and this story. And what do we have? It was one night we had a dinner and we were discussing contracts that needed to be renewed for things like sub-publishing in Europe with Artemis. And I asked Doug to drive Michelle home. And the next day he's claiming he was intimate with her. Now with Doug, bless his heart, half of what he says is invention. And part of me went, he's just bullshitting. But I did try and cover my tracks by saying, you keep your pen out of the company fucking inkwell. Do not have an intimate relationship with the band's attorney. That is entirely unhealthy and a no-no. And I thought that was the end of it. Well, of course, transpiring, with Axl finally phoning me and saying, I can't work with you anymore, Niv. Did Michelle, as the band's attorney, who I brought on board, ever call me to say, you got a problem? You need to deal with this. Axl is bound and determined to get rid of you, which would have been a smart call, because if she'd been smart, she'd have gone, look at where the band started out, look at where the band are today. It may be a volatile environment. There may be sparks flying between some of the personalities, but it works and it's been productive. We do not want to lose a part of the molecule. And I was a part of the molecule at that point. All right. That would have been the smart call on her behalf. And to call me and say, you got a problem. No, she didn't. Because I have no doubt in my mind that there was pillow talk that he was going to manage the band and she was going to be the band's attorney, and they were going to be a nice little power couple in Hollywood, and their future was going to look so great they were going to have to wear shades. So what happens? They get rid of me. You've had one punk cover album and one solo album since 1991 and getting rid of me. Well done, Michelle. Well done, Doug. You got nothing done with your pillow talk rapping. Nothing got done. 30 years. Can you imagine if that band had stayed together, the kind of catalog they'd have after 30 years? It would have been awesome. I mean, my little fantasy was, hey, maybe I'm getting my own Rolling Stones. You know, when the Rolling Stones go out on a stage, they have got over 200 songs to choose from,
Mm-hmm.
play live. You know, all the records that weren't made, all the songs that weren't written. You can lay that at Michelle's door and Doug's door. And she's now number 2 at UMG. She can't write a song. She can't manage a band. She can't produce a record. But I tell you what she can do. She can give our songs away to streaming services for almost nothing. So no revenue goes through to the creators and the performers. Oh, and by the way, guess who owns or partially owns the streaming sites? Exactly. It's the sort of thing the mob would do.
She like almost like a roulette Morris Levy type person with the female.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, think about it. Do they care about those who created and performed what they sell? No, they don't. What they care about is how can we rip them off and how can we make the maximum amount of money? Do you know how much UMG make on streaming per hour profit? Approximately $1 million an hour.
And the artist, what are they getting out of that?
We get shavings of shavings of shavings of a crumb.
It's crazy.
Crazy? Yeah, no, but it's fucking dishonest. And if you really want to do some research, do some research into UMG and Lou Wasserman, who put UMG and MCA together. Do some research on them. And what I find extraordinary is the statements that Ronald Reagan, as president, used to bend a knee to Lou Wasserman. Now, why would that happen? What kind of a person is Lou Wasserman?
The story, I guess history repeats itself. You know, you have, when I mentioned Morris Levy, whose character, for everybody watching, his character is based on one of the characters in Sopranos, mob guy. And Morris would put his name on songs that he didn't write for the artist. Nothing to do with the artist. The only thing he had to do is like, listen, kid, you get this and I get this. You understand? And there's an episode I have Tommy James, who wrote a book about the mob and his life. So you guys could check on that episode.
They were poor black kids.
They ripped them all off.
Who were thrilled to have a suit
just to get a record,
and get to play in a club where, you know, there were faces and wealthy people, and they were thrilled just to get that. Meantime, they're being taken off their own songs as writers, and somebody else's name is being put in there. You know, Morris Levy, what a character.
What a character. So there's a bunch of stories with him trying to go after John Lennon for the rock and roll record. He even claimed he wrote one of Chuck Berry's songs because he got the publishing, I guess, on it. But it goes back. So let me ask you something now. We talk about Goldstein coming in there, who was just, for people who don't know, he was just a tour manager. He had no experience really managing any business deals.
He wasn't a tour manager. He was a security guy.
That's right. He was a security guy. That's right.
Yeah. And to my knowledge, and remembering what I can of the initial interview I gave him, he had done security for Air Supply and David Lee Roth.
Okay.
Since that time, obviously that list has expanded to be more impressive because I had to sit through one of his interviews yesterday and endure it. But at the time he sat with me, those are the two entities that he had done security for. And I was in a bind. I had a good tour manager for GnR called Colin Gardner. And Colin was useful to me because he was a very competent live sound engineer. So I was getting a twofer for the cost of one. He was tour managing and he was doing the sound. And for example, our first trip to England, he was tour manager and sound manager. He got thrown off the bus during the latter part of the Cult tour. I think we had 2-3 dates left. So I've got a record out and I've got to keep my band moving.
Mm-hmm.
I've got to get them more live work. I need a tour manager right now. And I called Feldstein, who was my accountant, Great White's accountant. And I said, can you give me a recommendation? He's an accountant. He deals with tour managers all the time. Can you give me a recommendation? And he sent down 2 or 3 people. And with Doug, he was a security guy. Doug is very obsequious still. Very good at ingratiating himself and saying the right thing. And he said the right things to me. And I didn't have an awful lot of time to go through an awful lot of people. And I went, he's a cop's son. He's not going to be taking cocaine, I hope. Please, God, put him on the bus. And he was functional. So, and at that point, and there was an interesting thing in his interview. Here's another piece of typical Doug Goldstein bullshit. He said that I offered him a job because Axl hated me. I hated Axl, and the only way I'd keep the band is if I had Doug on board, which is an absolute pile of crap. Okay. First of all, I well remember Axl at Long Beach on the bus with the Cult tour, looking at me and saying, I miss you. And I'm going, I miss you too, but I've got 2 bands on the road. I can't just be with you, you know? And at the other time, at that time, the other band was ahead of GnR. They went gold in November of '87 and were on their way to platinum. And I had to keep an eye on that, as well as keeping an eye on my my Guns kids. Anyway, up until the end of 1987, I was on my fucking own. I did not have a receptionist. I did not have an assistant. And I had 2 bands I was trying to break. And at the end of the day, they both went platinum on April 7th, 1988. Tell me one other single individual who managed to have 2 bands break simultaneously. I think I did my job pretty fucking well, especially considering I had no support. So I've got this tour manager out there who looks like a cop, and Izzy's calling me up and going, dude, who is this guy? He looks like a gay cop. And I go, he can keep the bus going. He can keep things in order. All right, let's keep him in place for now. And at that point, when we got back from, and I think we did the 5-show headline tour of the UK with Doug. And at that point, I'm going, I'm on my fucking own. Let's give this guy a go. You can become a part of my company, right? I'm on my own up until that point. I was sharing a receptionist with Perry Watts Russell, who I shared an office with. Perry Watts Russell managed Berlin. And we were in the same little thing of rooms, and we could actually afford to split the cost of a receptionist at that time. So, no, I didn't bring on Goldstein to keep Axl in place. I brought him on because I needed to start to build the fucking company, because it was starting to go. I had 2 bands that were breaking. I couldn't do it all on my own. I needed somebody, for example, to be the janitor. When Axl throws his fucking piano in the pool, guess what, Dougie? You go and dig it out of the water. So that's why he was brought on. And he complained in the interview that he was only paid $500 a week. Guess what, Dougie? That was $500 more than I was getting, because I didn't get a single dime out of GnR for the first year I worked with them. I worked that entire first year for free. Izzy went down to Boulevard to see how much I'd taken out and was horrified to find out that I had not been paid 1 fucking penny for a year. All right. So with Goldstein getting $500 a week, he was high on the hog as far as I was concerned, you know. And here's another point. In the 33 months that I had him involved with what I was doing, I paid him over $1 million. Wow. For 33 months of work. It was just less than 3 years. And I paid him over $1 million. So he was not hard done by. He was not abused by me. And he's a lying sack of shit. Now, that's my opinion. And I could be wrong, we will say, for legal reasons. Mm-hmm. But just watch him and listen to him. See if you find any credibility in what he says.
Tried to get him on the show. He said he would come on, never came on. Now he's, you know, I think he's doing sales somewhere, and he turned his world into God.
He's turned his world to God?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. That's surprising. Started out with them. They were within... Eddie Rosenblatt, president of Geffen, told Tom Zutaut when I signed on with GnR that I had 3 months to make it look productive. Otherwise, he was going to drop the band. So that's where they were. Okay? As I said before, the last thing that I did as manager of GnR was put Wembley Stadium on sale. And that's, what, 125,000 or whatever. And it sold out real fast. So for all the ups and downs, for all the fact that Goldstein had spent 30 years saying Axl and Niv hated each other and I was the only one who kept it going, he's full of shit. He really is. For all he says that, I have to say, look at what happened after I was gone and what creativity was there. I think I could have held it together longer. And let me get something straight. I don't hate Axl. In point of fact, I rather feel for him because, you know, as he went out in Rolling Stone and said, he had a terrible childhood. Awful. And then after that, he has to live the rest of his life being Axl fucking Rose. And what I mean by that is you and I have a privilege because we're 1 foot in and 1 foot out. Mm-hmm. We're known a little bit, but we also have a degree of anonymity. And one of the things you learn about anonymity is when you lose it, that it's a pain in the ass. And can you imagine waking up every fucking morning and having to be either Slash or Axl, and fundamentally going through that mental thing every morning of, am I going to leave my house? Because if I leave my house, I'm Axl fucking Rose, and there are going to be people in my face and people pulling on my sleeve and people waving at me and people getting in my face and people taking pictures of me, and I have to be Axl fucking Rose, whatever that is, all day today because I'm going out. If I stay home and hide, I can just be me. You know, I think Slash has done an amazing job of being Slash, because every time he goes out, and he's not trying to disguise himself by pulling his hair back, taking his glasses off, and hiding his hat. You know, he's got to deal with people and their expectations and their demands. You know, I am really happy that I never had to be either Slash or Axl, because I think it would drive me fucking crazy.
You said you got the call from Axl, and I can't work with you anymore, Alan. What was going through your head when you're hearing this?
I was surprised, but I'm trying to look for another word for surprise, because it was surprising and yet it wasn't surprising. All right, because I mean, you know, he banned me from the Aerosmith for 3 weeks because I made him come out to it. He was always complaining about me. How many times did he ever say thank you to me? When he goes from nowhere to Wembley Stadium in 5 or 6 years, how many times did he say thank you? Not once. So,
you know, you were basically almost like a parent to him too. You had your best intentions for the man.
Well, there's the cliche. You're the parental figure with a certain degree of authority. Slash looked at me one day and said, "Oh, you use the mushroom theory on us." And I go, "What the fuck are you talking about?" He goes, "You keep us in the dark, you feed us shit, and we keep growing." So, you know, I went, okay, I get what you're trying to say here. And there is that aspect of who controls the entity and who wants to control the entity. And it's in band after band after band that they fall apart because somebody wants to exert more control than they should. And that's part of leaving home and going away from your parent.
Yeah.
All right. You've set us up to renegotiate the Geffen contract. You've renegotiated the Artemis contract. You've renegotiated the Brockham contract. You have the first 50 dates on sale. Oh, you can go now. Don't need you no more. You're in my way because I'm going to take the name from my bandmates and you won't let me. You know. So there you go. It was very hurtful. It was disappointing. I suffered betrayal in all my significant relationships within a certain period of time, including the ex-wife. And that led to profound long walks with the black dog of depression. I went through depression for a long period of time. It took me a long time to get through it and get back to being centered, balanced, seeing things for what they are, seeing things for what they're not, and not being that concerned about it. It was an amazing 5 or 6 years. It was also, I made this observation more than once. In September 1986, when I signed a contract with GnR, I can say, and it's an exaggeration because obviously there were moments of delight and joy, but I can say the carefree of being involved in making rock and roll dissipated, because as soon as I'm with GnR, it's pressure, stress, and anxiety. You know, as Izzy famously said to me in my hotel room in Toronto on the first Cult tour, he comes barging into my room, flops on the sofa, looks at me and says, unforgettably, that fucker makes us fucking miserable every fucking day. On the other hand, when he was wound up with his conflict and contentious songs and on, Axl was phenomenal on a stage. Oh my God. Absolutely phenomenal.
When the grass is green and the girls are pretty, take me.
with one of the extraordinary voices ever.
Absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely.
which brings us around into a circle of how can you go out there and be yelling and screaming, they're out to get me, night after night, especially when you're living in a fucking huge mansion in Malibu. Yeah, they're out to get you, Axe. I was the one who got him to the finish line. If we say that Wembley Stadium is the finish line, you're there, you're done.
Yeah.
And I'm disposable at that point. I got him there. You know, one of the points I make in my book is caring about other people. Does that just leave it and giving them all that you are and giving them all that you have in effort? Does that just leave you vulnerable to being betrayed and abused? Did I make some bad judgments at times? Everybody does.
Yeah.
But the numbers are unequivocal. They've sold over 100 million records. I think I did my job right.
Did you say anything to Axl? Try to just talk to him as a human? Axl, you're making a wrong move right now. What are you thinking?
No, I just said, listen, he called me. He was in LA. I was at the Meadowlands, at a gig at the Meadowlands. And I said, listen, I'll be back in 2 days. Let's go and at least have dinner together and talk it through. And if you still have the same mind, okay. Never saw him again. He did not have the wherewithal to have a final dinner with me and talk it through. He didn't have the class.
All these years later, bump into him eye to eye. Long time no see, old friend.
I wouldn't use the terminology old friend, but I would say, hey, do you want to go and get a cup of tea?
But you have not ever seen him face to face since.
No.
That was it. Wow. How about the rest of the guys? Like, I know, you keep in touch, but during the time right after the split with them, did they hide from you or people would check in on you? Hey, man, how you doing? Like Izzy?
Izzy and Slash would
Because
check
the
in.
Juju Hounds, right? Around that time.
Well, yeah. Before the Juju Hounds, I mean, Izzy called me up and said, come up to the house. And I went, yeah, well, I'll go up there. He said, maybe we go for a ride. And I turn up at Izzy's place when he was living on Laurel Canyon then. And there were 3 Harleys in his front yard. And I walked in and I said, oh, we're going to go for a ride? And he goes, yeah, choose one. And I go, well, I wouldn't mind riding that one. He said, well, it's yours. He gave me a beautiful Harley as a divorce present. Izzy's class.
Steven was the first, right? Was Steven, then you, then Izzy.
Yeah.
Second order.
Yeah. Izzy was 3 months after me.
3 months after that. Wow.
Yeah.
He was just done.
Yeah, he was done.
Wow. Do you keep in touch with Izzy today? Do you guys talk?
He actually came out here and visited me once in Prescott. He's very retiring. I have a mutual friend that occasionally I will send my best wishes to him and ask after his health, and I'll get an answer back that he's doing okay. Have I seen him in years? No, I haven't seen him in years.
He doesn't want to play music, huh? He's written things like years, but he just doesn't really want to do anything, play out or nothing, huh?
He's made 10 albums?
Yeah, he's made a bunch of records.
Yeah.
But he never goes out to try to support it or play them.
No.
Live gigs. Doesn't want to do that.
No, he doesn't care for all that.
One of the greatest songwriters. He really is. He's just a great songwriter. He has the roots, the essence of everybody who I love.
He had an unimpeachable street vernacular in his lyrics. And I loved his right hand because he knew where to leave the spaces. He knew how to syncopate a rhythm and make it work.
Tasty.
Yes, absolutely. I don't surround myself with bits of the past and live in a museum. But I do have one photograph up in my living room, and it's of Ronnie, Keith, and Izzy playing together on the stage in Atlantic City, because that to me is 3 chips off the same piece of marble, those 3 guys.
Absolutely. And there's a chapter in the book about that. And when they do work with the Salt of the Earth, you talk about that in the book. You guys got to check out the book, but that's a spectacular performance. Axl, Nick, and Izzy together with the Stones.
That, you know, Axl has fear of going on stage. Who the fuck has got the confidence to go on stage with Mick Jagger? I mean, come on.
Tough one.
Tough. It doesn't get any tougher than that. However, you know, I will make this observation, and it's an objective observation. Axl wiped the floor with him.
Let me tell you something. Those guys.
The song was Salt of the Earth, and Axl delivered the point and the meaning of the song, whereas to me, Jagger was just languid and indifferent.
Almost like he wrote the song, Axl. I felt it.
Yes. Yeah.
Absolutely.
He got it.
He got it. Both of those guys. It felt. I felt like it was more their song than it was the Stones song. That's how they took. And if anybody watched, I'll put a clip right here.
Into this faceless crowd that they love so
See that 4 seconds of that, but it's just incredible.
Yeah.
Performance.
Yeah. By the way, Axl had me thrown out of the building.
So you didn't even get to see the performance?
Oh no, I did what all the fans did. I watched it on pay-per-view.
Oh my God.
I was there with him in Atlantic City, and he was late, and he demanded that I go down to where the Stones were getting ready to rehearse with him and Izzy, and tell them that he'd be down in an hour or 2. And I'm looking at him and going, "You are kidding me. You want me to go down and tell the Rolling Stones that they have to wait 2 hours for my singer?" I said, get in the shower. You'll be fine. Get down there. And his way out of it was, okay, I'll go down there as long as fucking Niven's thrown out of the building. And my attitude is, fine. If you're going to be there and you're going to perform, that's my job done. I'm going to the airport. I'm flying back to LA. See ya. Another part of the book, I say, why do managers exist? And I point out that most of the time, your competence and usefulness as a manager is your ability to think on your feet. So if you're at a Rolling Stones show and Axl's saying he's not coming, and you've got Brian Ahern, the production manager, taking you into a production cabin and saying, you tell me what to expect. I have 77,000 people here. Do I need to go out and tell the LAPD we may have a riot because your man is not coming? You tell me what I should do. And of course, I go back to him and I say, Brian, do you have a no questions asked contact in the LAPD?
Mm.
And he goes, yes, of course I do. And he leaves the production cabin, and this guy in a sort of light tan polyester suit comes in, and he says, Brian says you need something. And I say, yes, I do need something. I need you to get a very reliable pair of cops to go to this address, get the occupants of this apartment into their black and white and to the back of the stage as fast as they can get here. And that's how Axe arrived with Aaron for the first Rolling Stones show back in 89 or whenever it was, 88 or 89.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy, but it's thinking on your feet. And my stipulation was, if you have to put handcuffs on him, put handcuffs on him. but bring him here. He is going to do this fucking show one way or another.
It is crazy. Let me ask you, because there's so much to talk. You could go Guns N' Roses. We could go down, keep talking about them. But when you were writing this book, was Jack Russell? Was he able to read anything you've written before he passed on?
No one's read anything I've written until now, because I was just going to write what I was going to write, and I don't care what anybody else says. All right, I'm not getting other people's permission.
To
construct what I want to construct. On the other hand, I spent a lot of time conversing with the girl who wrote Jack's book.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd read at least 2/3 of it before it came out. So turn it around. With Jack's book, I gave her a lot of time and a lot of information and corrected a lot of stuff for her. Writing on my own, I just wanted to get into my own groove, find my own voice, and see if I could get it onto the screen. That was it. Yeah. It's not about me asking permission from other people. Part of me goes, fuck you, my First Amendment fucking rights take precedent over your hurt feelings.
True. What about stories that were left out of the book? Would there be a part 2 to this book?
I'm not planning on it. I'm not thinking about it. Somebody has approached me and said, you and I together could write the ultimate tell-all about GnR. And quite frankly, I'm not that enthused about that. That's not what I wanted to do. If I'd wanted to write a tell-all about GnR, I'd have done it. What I wanted to write was a collection of rock and roll stories that hopefully entertained, and I wrote it more for the curious than I did for the fan. All right, fans are, extremists one way or another. They're in this camp, they're in that camp. They believe this, they don't believe that. I mean, I could give a damn. What I'd like to envisage in my head was somebody being in an airport, picking it up and looking at it and going, yeah, this might get me to Omaha. Somebody who's curious. I read a book recently that I was sent by its publisher. It was called Heartbreaker. And it's really well done, really well written. But there's a difference between that book and my book, because Heartbreaker is written for a fan. My book is written for anybody. If you're just remotely interested, pick it up, give it a whirl. You might learn something. You might laugh. It might weave some things together.
Axl and the Polaroid.
There's another aspect. I mean, I feel badly for Axl because obviously he was trying to deal with negativities and how can I say this best? I'll use the term deal with the bats in his belfry, which sounds like a sort of superficial dismissal, but I don't mean it in that way at all. He's trying to come to terms with himself and who he is and what his past is. And he ends up being delivered to Yoda, who is a con, whose husband, every time Axe went out to Sedona, would pocket money and go up to Canada and buy land. I mean, I'm sitting there and going, here's a guy who's looking for some spiritual guidance. And he ends up with fucking Yoda. You know what I say? Well done, Doug Goldstein again.
Yeah, they got into Axl's head. He was more of a yes man, Axl. And he yesed his way into your position with this lady. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Everything Axl wanted
on top of that, Axl owns the name Guns N' Roses.
Yeah.
And Doug Goldstein tells people, I didn't know about this. I was on my way to America because my wife was having a baby. And I'm sitting there going, you're full of it. You're the band manager. Of course, you know every piece of paper that's generated by the legal firm that represents the band. If you don't do that, then you're not the fucking manager of the band. Oh, and you just so happen to have this paper delivered to Duff and Slash right at the convenient moment that you can say that you're on a transatlantic flight going home to a maternity hospital. Well, what a coincidence. Well, you're pretty good at your planning, aren't you, Dougie? I've got an alibi. I wasn't there. I didn't know my kid was being born. Yeah, you set that up. Of course you knew what was going on. And of course you knew that they were getting this piece of paper that was coercing their name out of their hands.
Pass through the manager knows everything that's going on.
Yes, absolutely. But in the early days of GnR, I didn't spend an awful lot of time discussing the obvious with them. You want to be on tour? I'll get you the best tour I can. We've got a strategy to break the band. I'm going to employ the strategy. You're going to do interviews with these people because they're the right people to write about you. That's going to happen. I mean, we didn't have formal band meetings all the time. I mean, I remember one band meeting before we went to England for the first time in the Hell House, and they were all sat in a row in front of me on the most disgusting sofa I've ever seen. And Duff looks at me and he goes, so Nib, do you think we can do this? Meaning go to England and perform in England and pull it off. And my response was, why the fuck do you think I'm here? Of course you can do it. It's going to work.
So in the end, as we all know, Doug didn't last.
He claims he was
for a long time,
band manager for 17 years.
Mhm.
He was actually manager from 1991 to whenever he left. So that's probably about 10 years or so. He was there for a very, very long time.
But did he leave on his own, or did
No,
he get?
he claims he did because he wanted to spend more time with his family. But that's, I think, a fabrication. In my perception, I would say Beta got rid of him.
Because she saw he was not doing right for Axl.
I think Beta's very good at seeing what's right for her. You know, people always make the comment, oh, the fucking maid's the manager, what the fuck? Yeah, but she brought family to him. And in bringing family to him, she managed to get him through a lot of gigs. And you have to acknowledge that. And you have to say, well done, Beta. You did good.
Was she there when you were there?
No.
No.
She came along as Stephanie Seymour's maid.
Okay.
When Axl was going to get married to Stephanie Seymour. She was actually his fiancée at some point.
God. Wow.
And there's a very interesting tale about how that all fell apart, which I didn't put in my book, and I will tell you off air.
I mean, they went through a lot of managers, just the Guns N' Roses, you know, Doc McGee was.
Doc McGee was there for a heartbeat. A guy called Merck was there for a heartbeat. Who else?
Azoff?
Azoff was there for a heartbeat. None of them lasted.
But the maid did.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Keeper of the door.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Now the Juju Hounds, what a great band that was. Just the whole band, the songs, the band.
There's a live EP, and it features tracks like Highway 49. And if you want to know how good that band is, find that EP. It's terrific.
That's so
Absolutely
good.
Terrific. Absolutely terrific. It was a good band.
It was a great band. They did a great version of Pressure Drop.
Yeah, and Charlie was a delight because Charlie, the drummer, had played with Dylan, and he
Mm-hmm.
would sit in the back of the bus and tell you Dylan stories that would just crack you up all the time. I mean, that was a real pleasure. But that was a really, really good band.
Jimmy
And-
Asher, some bass.
Yeah, and oh, by the way, as Tom Shoutout reminded me just yesterday, Goldstein and Axl undermined Izzy's record with all their might and effort, because the first track did well at radio, and then the phones started ringing off the hook and Geffen that you can't support that record. We don't want that record to do well. If you want to piss Axl off, then have Izzy have a successful record. They were rotten. They were rotten.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So they put the kibosh on the Juju Hounds, huh?
Yep. Shoutout was reminding me of that just yesterday. If they'd shared income fairly, he'd be in Guns N' Roses now. I don't doubt it. If they'd been prepared to share with Izzy, he'd be there now.
That was Mr. Alan Niven. If you want to catch this episode unedited, you can watch it in our members only club. In the meantime, post your comments down below. We always love to hear from you. And you can pre-order Alan's book, Sound and Fury, right now, down below, or click right above your screen. Until then, who loves you, baby? We do. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you all later. Artist on Record, the Rock and Roll Podcast, is now streaming on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeart Podcast, and YouTube Music. Listen to us now.